There's a country where monks wake before the sun to walk barefoot through the same silence their ancestors walked 5 centuries ago. While just a few hundred kilometers south, a river carves the largest waterfall in Southeast Asia by sheer, uncontrollable force. A country that was bombed more heavily per capita than any nation in human history. A place where 1,000 stone jars sit scattered across a plateau, and no one still knows for certain who put them there or why. This is Laos. Landlocked, mountainous, and often overlooked on the map of Southeast Asia, Laos has spent centuries being pushed, pressured, and reshaped by forces larger than itself. Empires, rivers, wars, and now tourism. And yet it keeps adapting without losing its shape. Over the next few minutes, we'll trace a single question through 6 places. What happens when a land is never allowed to simply exist and finds a way to endure anyway? Here's what most people don't know. Laos is the only landlocked country in Southeast Asia, entirely boxed in by 5 neighbors. And its lifeline, the Mekong River, was never fully its own. It's shared, contested, and increasingly dammed by the countries around it. Meanwhile, in the north, a UNESCO town has become so beloved by outsiders that its own residents now debate whether their home still belongs to them. Now let's follow the thread, from the sacred stillness of the old royal capital to a river gorge no engineer could ever fully cage. Imagine a town so quiet at 5:45 a.m. that you can hear sandals on stone before you see who's wearing them. Luang Prabang sits at the confluence of the Mekong and the Nam Khan, wrapped in mist that clings to the hills like it's reluctant to leave. Saffron-robed monks emerge from dozens of temples in single file, and the town's residents kneel at the roadside with sticky rice, feeding a tradition that predates the nation itself. This was once the royal capital of the Long Song Kingdom, the land of 1,000,000 elephants, and its temples, gilded and layered like folded paper, have survived colonization, war, and now a tourism boom that brings more visitors each year than the town has residents. UNESCO protection saved its architecture, but protection is its own kind of control, and locals quietly admit that heritage status has frozen their homes into a postcard, even as their lives keep moving forward. Standing on the riverbank at dusk, watching monks' robes catch the last orange light, you feel 2 centuries pressing against each other at once, one preserved, one still breathing. The road south from here climbs into limestone hills toward a waterfall the color of turquoise glass. Have you ever wondered how water can look almost artificial? Too blue, too clean, too perfect, and still be entirely natural? Quang Si's pools cascade down limestone terraces in tiers. Each basin dyed a milky turquoise by dissolved calcium carbonate, the same mineral that builds stalactites in caves. It's tempting to see this as untouched wilderness. It isn't, entirely. A rescued Asiatic black bear sanctuary sits at the entrance, a quiet reminder that even paradise here needed intervention to survive poaching and habitat loss. Nature and human management coexist, uneasily, but necessarily. There's a coolness to the air here that clings to your skin, mineral and green all at once. The smell of wet limestone and crushed leaves. It's one of the only places in the region where the tension at the heart of this journey briefly resolves. Control and adaptation working together instead of against each other. But that balance is rare. Further south, the land insists on doing things its own way. Picture jagged limestone karsts erupting straight out of flat rice paddies, like the earth simply forgot to smooth them down. Vang Vieng's landscape looks almost computer-generated. Sheer gray towers draped in vines, some over 300 meters tall, formed over millions of years as an ancient seabed buckled and eroded into these surreal peaks. The Nam Song River winds lazily beneath them, and at sunrise, hot air balloons drift silently over the valley, catching the first gold light before the karsts even wake up. This town has a complicated recent history. A decade ago, it was infamous for reckless backpacker tubing and party culture, until a string of tourist deaths forced the government to shut much of it down almost overnight. What followed was a genuine reinvention. Kayaking, caving, rock climbing, blue lagoons for swimming. A town that adapted its entire identity rather than disappear. Standing in a limestone cave mouth, feeling the cool underground air breathe out past you, you sense how much this landscape has already survived, geologically and culturally. Control was attempted here and failed. What worked instead was adaptation. From here, the journey turns inland, toward a plateau holding one of Southeast Asia's oldest unsolved mysteries. Somewhere on a quiet, sun-baked plateau in northern central Laos, there are more than 2,000 megalithic stone jars, some large enough to fit a grown adult, scattered across dozens of sites, some weighing over a ton. Archaeologists still can't agree on who carved them, or fully why. And this same plateau, called the Plain of Jars, is also one of the most heavily bombed patches of land on Earth. Imagine walking through open grassland, sheep grazing between 2,000-year-old stone vessels, and being told to step only where a white or red marker tells you, because beneath the grass, live cluster bombs may still remain destroyed. The jars themselves, carved from sandstone and granite, are believed by some researchers to be ancient burial urns, by others, ceremonial vessels for a lost civilization whose written records never survived. What's harder to look away from is the war beneath the wonder. Laos remains the most bombed country per capita in history, a legacy of a conflict most of its own citizens weren't alive to remember choosing. Yet farmers here still till the soil, cautiously, generation after generation, adapting their entire relationship with land itself to survive it. Few places on this journey capture the tension as sharply. Ancient control long lost to time, modern control imposed by war, and an unbroken thread of human adaptation running underneath both. If the Plain of Jars shows a wound the land has learned to live with, what comes next shows a country actively remaking its own economy from the ground up. Have you ever tasted coffee grown in soil made from a volcano that erupted before humans existed? The Bolivian Plateau rises nearly 1,300 meters above sea level. Its rich red volcanic earth ideal for growing some of the finest Arabica and Robusta coffee in Southeast Asia. Waterfalls tumble everywhere here. Tad Phane drops in twin cascades over 120 meters through dense jungle, while Tad Yuong crashes into a wide, swimmable pool ringed by mist. The cool highland air smells of wet earth and roasting coffee beans, a rare sensory combination in a country otherwise defined by tropical heat. It's a quiet case study in the whole nation's story, something imposed from outside, gradually made native. But nothing on this journey compares in raw scale to what waits where Laos finally meets its southern border. This is where the Mekong stops being a river and becomes an argument. At Sifondan, the 4,000 islands, the Mekong splits into a maze of channels, sandbars, and forested islets stretching over 50 kilometers wide, the broadest point along the river's entire course. And at its edge sits Khone Phapheng, the largest waterfall by volume in all of Southeast Asia. Not tall, but enormous. A churning wall of brown water and white spray thundering across nearly the full width of the river, loud enough to feel in your chest before you even see it. Endangered Irrawaddy dolphins still surface in the calmer pools nearby, one of the last populations left in the entire Mekong basin. French colonists once tried to build a railway here to bypass the falls entirely. Remnants of the old tracks and a rusted locomotive still sit half-swallowed by jungle, a monument to an empire that assumed it could out-engineer a river of this scale. It couldn't. The Mekong simply kept moving. Standing at the edge of Khone Phapheng at golden hour, spray drifting up and catching the light like slow-motion rain, you understand something about this entire country. Every empire, every war, every well-meaning attempt to manage this land, the French railway, the American bombs, the UNESCO plaques, the dam proposals still debated upstream, has tried, in its own way, to impose control. And every time, Laos has simply adapted around it, absorbing the pressure without breaking its shape, the way this river absorbs the rock in its path, without ever asking permission. In Laos, control and adaptation don't take turns. They happen at once, in the same breath. A monk's ancient ritual survives inside a modern tourist economy. A war-scarred field still grows rice. A colonial crop becomes a point of national pride. A river too wide and too fast to dam completely just keeps finding new channels to move through. Nothing here was ever fully tamed, but almost nothing here was lost either. If these landscapes sparked your curiosity, Subscribe for more journeys across extraordinary, overlooked places. And tell me in the comments, when the world tries to reshape you, do you resist it like stone or adapt like a river?